We need to listen to our parents, pay attention. I think that's what God intends for us to do. In fact, I still hear my father, who died in 2001, he's still in my head from time to time. My mother had a saying, though, that I take issue with because I think she was wrong. And what did she say? Over and over again, she said, "No rest for the wicked, and the righteous don't need it." Now, she said that in jest, but as right as she was about most things in life, she was dead wrong about that one. What that indicates to me is that really there's no rest for anyone. Jesus was one who, according to the text early in Mark's gospel, went away to a lonely place to regroup, to regather himself, to renew himself, to receive power from God, to recharge his batteries for ministry, for life. What is faithfulness? Is it serving until you drop? Scripture says no, absolutely not. Here's my sense about Myers Park. There are a large number of tired people at Myers Park. Tired because you've walked with this church through difficult and challenging days that continue even to this moment. Myers Park needs some of you who are on the sidelines saying, "Oh, I did my turn years ago. It's time for somebody else." We need you to step up and give some rest to those who are weary. Faithfulness is doing God's work in the world. That's our vocation. That's our calling. Jesus told his disciples, told you and me, that greater things than I have done, you will do. What does it mean to be faithful, to be a part of God's kingdom work? You heard the text from Galatians, not growing weary in well-doing. Do you ever get weary in well-doing? Yeah, I do. Does that mean ceaseless activity? No. Where then do we find the strength to do the important work that you and I are called to do? Scripture calls us to pace ourselves. Faithfulness is not ceaseless activity. It doesn't mean that you have to be here every time the doors are unlocked, but some of you do need to show up a little more often. Wouldn't hurt you. And as Diane reminds me on vacation, it might actually do you some good if you went to church, Layne. But it does mean that your presence and participation in the life of Myers Park needs to be passionate and consistent. Jesus showed us by the way he lived that there is a rhythm to life: activity, rest, work, relax, go after it, sit back. It's woven into creation, for on the seventh day, God rested and said, "Wow, I've done good work." Your heart beats for as long as you live. 60, 70, 80, 90 years. Do you know how it beats that long? Because there's a rhythm. Squeeze, rest. Squeeze, rest. Squeeze, rest. Over and over again, 100,000 times a day. 36 million times a year, over 2.5 billion times if you live to 70. Don't check my math because I didn't major in math, but let me just say it's a bunch, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. And written into the Isaiah text that was our meditation for this morning is the admonition to rest. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Those that rest will find new strength. And you remember the 23rd Psalm, He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. There's a rhythm to faithfulness in the service of God, and we need to be sensitive to that. As we look to the future, how do we provide for that rhythm to provide renewal for God's servants? How do we have enough trained and committed leaders so that some don't have to do the same thing over and over and over and over again until they get to sinful weariness? How do we train such leaders? Yes, a part of faithful service is pacing ourselves, paying attention to the rhythms of the Spirit and our own needs. But there's another way that we keep from exhaustion and sinful weariness, and that's faithfulness involves nourishment. Remember in John chapter 4, Jesus is talking to the woman at the well. The disciples have gone to town to get food, and they're astonished to find Jesus talking with this woman at the well and encourages him, eat something, Jesus. And Jesus says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. I'm nourished. I'm energized by my work. My food is found in faithful service, Jesus says. In other words, we receive strength, we receive nourishment when we are doing what God has called and gifted us to do. And if we find ourselves getting weary, tired to the bone, exhausted, ready to fall, considering throwing in the towel, a sinful weariness, so to speak, a chronic exhaustion in which our faith ceases to give us meaning in life, then whatever we're doing is not God's will and purposes for us. We're trying to do it on our own power. The text doesn't say you'll mount up with wings like eagles if you do it under your own power, does it? Only those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, shall be able to run and not be weary, and walk and not faint. Sometimes it's just commitment, isn't it? I know you will find this as a stunning surprise when I tell you that Diane does not wake up every morning, look over at me beside her and say, joy unbound, how did I marry such a wonderful human being? You seem to believe that. Sometimes it's about commitment, isn't it? That we are committed to this. And we will wait, but we will be committed for the long haul. And that's what Myers Park needs from you, from me, from us. People committed for the long haul. To be faithful. How can we encourage each other? How can we bless each other? How can we do the things that we need to do to be God's faithful people in this place? It's work and then rest, work and then rest. Some of us are weary, bordering on sinful weariness, trying to do it on our own power, and we need restful feeding. That's why we gather for worship so often. That's why I hope in months to come, we will have additional faith formation opportunities so you can be nourished for the journey, nourished for ministry, nourished for faithfulness. And one more thing. Unless you think faithfulness needs to be grand and glorious acts, we would do well to remember that sometimes faithfulness is found in the little things. Sometimes our life and the lives of others are changed in the small acts of faithfulness that we embody. Friedrich Buechner said that the place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep need meet. Let me share one opportunity, a simple little thing. Martha Abernathy and Jeannie Phillips would like to hear from you about volunteering at Freedom School, to read, just to read with some of the students there so they don't fall behind. I plan on volunteering. I hope you will join me. That's a small thing that we can do that might change somebody's life. Yes, it can be something very small, and in fact, our own lives may be transformed by that, by our halting, meager efforts. 29 years ago, this past week, Diane, our daughters, and I boarded a plane in Dallas, Texas, and flew to London for a 6-week sabbatical. It was a pulpit exchange with a church in Burton Latimer, England, and the small church I served in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We got there 2 weeks before the pulpit exchange was to begin, but we went to Burton Latimer, and John Tattersall, the pastor there, who hadn't left for the United States yet, showed us around the small church. It's the new church in town. The cornerstone says 1744. When we walked into the sanctuary, and the pulpit was about this high because it was on the level, the choir was back in the balcony, and the balcony went all the way around a little square sanctuary. One of the first things I noticed was the cross on the communion table, on the altar. Our sanctuary didn't have one, and I said, John, I would love to have a cross like that for our sanctuary. Where did you get it? Oh, David Rowe made it for us. He's on holiday right now, but when he comes back, I'll put the two of you together. He'll probably make one for you. So when David and Glenna got back from holiday, I talked to him. And he said, yeah, I'll be glad to make a cross. It was a budded cross. On each end, the clover leaf symbolizing the Trinity on each point of the cross. He said, but I want you to come over to my house. I want to tell you the story of the cross. You see, David is a joiner, works with wood, joins pieces of wood was his calling. He said, the first time I went into the sanctuary of Burton Latimer, one of the first things I noticed was there wasn't a cross. And so I made a cross, and they put it in the sanctuary. He said, now, I only went in frequently. I was too busy working. If I had a day off, I didn't want to go to church. He said, but every time I went, that cross began to do its work on me. Until finally, I heard the call and became a person of faith myself. You just never know, do you? The simple cross that David made, the replica that he made, sent to me, that cross that he made transformed his life. People of God, you just never know. You just never know.